Some mysteries are so extremely bizarre that they stick with you from the time you've heard the story and for the rest of your life. Such a story happened 62 years ago in Russia and has haunted everyone who heard the tale and saw the pictures of the scene ever since. That story is the Dyatlov Pass Incident, and it is in equal measure one of the most horrifying and fascinating unsolved, or perhaps recently solved, mysteries I've ever heard. What happened and the theories of what caused the tragedy have crossed over into the realms of other myths and legends, with each theory adding to the story's eeriness. Today on Mytheries, we're going to walk the tragic trail of Dyatlov Pass and try to understand what happened to the 9 hikers who never returned and whose journey ended in one of the world's greatest mysteries. The story of the Dyatlov Pass started when Igor Dyatlov put together a group of hikers to go together in the snowy terrain of Sverdlovsk Oblast to trek through the Kholat Syakhl, which held sadly a premonition and another name the area went by, Dead Mountain. Igor and his fellow hikers were all well trained and held certifications of experienced hikers. This expedition would give them all the additional experience needed to gain the next level of credential, Grade 3. They departed the day they received their route book, which would guide them on their journey. The names of the group were, along with Igor, Yuri Doroshenko, Ludmila Dubinya, Yuri Krevoshenko, Alexander Kolovov, Zinaida Kolomogorova, Rustem Slobodin, Nikolai Tilabo-Burganols, Simeon Zolotaryov, and Yuri Yudin. The journey would take a few days to get to where they would start their hike. They began on January 27th. Yuri Yudin would leave the group, saving himself the fate that would befall the rest of his friends due to the pain in his joints that made him unable to continue the journey. Dyatlov was supposed to send a telegram to the group's sports club when they returned back to the village of Izai. This was supposed to happen no later than February 12th. Let me take this opportunity to thank you for watching Mytheries and ask that if you enjoy our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now, like this video, and click on the bell so you can be notified each time a new video goes up. Now, back to the show. When there was no telegram from the group received, family and friends requested a search begin on February 20th. The first search group was students and family members, eventually getting the police and military involved. It would be nearly a week before the 9 bodies of the group would be discovered, and when they were, it was the beginning of the terrifying mystery. 9 sets of footprints were leading away from the campsite when it was found. The tent had been cut open from the inside, and everything was still inside, including almost all of the group's shoes. Following the trail to the forest edge, the first 2 bodies were discovered under a tree, where it appeared one of the 2 men were trying to climb up the tree, but possibly fell from the broken branches. Krivoshenko and Doroshenko were both found in their underwear, but had built a fire judging by the remains. It would later be discovered that Krivoshenko's clothing was slightly radioactive, perhaps due to his job at a secret nuclear facility, or possibly something else. Doroshenko's body was described as being a quote-unquote brown-purple color, and he had gray foam coming from his right cheek and gray liquid coming from his mouth. Dyatlov, Kolomogorova, and Slobodin were found next. They were found a short distance from the tree and not near the tent either. Again, they were not dressed for the terrain and appeared to be running away from the campsite. The remaining members of the group weren't found until months afterward, when the weather warmed and the snow had melted. Tilabo-Burganols, Dubinya, and Zolotaryov actually were found together in a ravine further in the woods. They were dressed, setting them apart from the others, and apparently had traded clothing, perhaps in an attempt to help each other stay warm, maybe even taking clothes from their dead companions. But why? Kolatov was also dressed, but his jacket was open and unzipped. This seems extremely odd considering the conditions they were in, as well as the fact that cause of death for the group was attributed to hypothermia. But once you find out how the bodies were found and the condition of them, that seems unlikely. Kovatov's clothing was also found to be radioactive. The autopsy also says his skin was a gray-green color with a tinge of purple. A quote from Yuri Kuntsevich, who is the head of the Dyatlov Foundation, described seeing the bodies thusly when the funerals were being held, something that only added to the mystery of what happened to the group. At that time, I lived next to the cemetery and was 12 years old, so I was really interested. I tried to push through the crowd to see everything, but it was impossible. I was amazed by some of the people in the crowd. They were wearing trilby-style felt hats and had jodhpurs or motorcycle riding pants. They were supervising the procession with their faces blank, expressing nothing. I was standing on a pile of earth at the graveside, and I was about 8 meters from the bodies. Their skin had a somewhat brick color. and I saw some of the students helping to lower the coffins to the graves. It was said they were there despite being forbidden to leave their classes to attend. The injuries suffered by the group are terrifying and at the time only added to the horror of the case. 2 of the team members, Dubinya and Zolotarev, had their chests basically crushed. Brignoles had had his skull smashed in before he died. Dubinya was also missing her tongue, eyes, lips, and other parts of her face. Some of her skull was missing. There appeared to be some sort of shelter improvised by the last 4 members to be discovered, but it only added to the mystery as well. 3 of the 4 had massive bone damage, and the bodies weren't found in the Dyatlov den, but some feet away from the shelter. This discovery also showed that the still surviving members at the time most likely did take clothes from those that had died, as the body of Ludmila Dubinya was wearing the pants of Krivononchenko. You can read the details of the autopsies that were performed on the group if you want to hear the bizarre details of the bodies, and honestly just sad and horrific ways these poor young people died. One detail that stood out for me was the remains of Ludmila, who it appears was still alive when she lost her tongue, going by the amount of blood found in her stomach. The autopsies, though, make it clear that the women were not sexually assaulted prior to or after death. Neither, it appeared, were the men in the group. The secretive burial, which happened after the seemingly bizarre finding of hypothermia, possibly due to an avalanche, for cause of death, angered many. Students from the Ural Polytechnical Institute wanted a chance to pay respects and mourn their fellows, but it also didn't help dispel any theories on what could have happened out in the cold dark of the past. There have been many banded about. One that was immediately thought of was the Mansi, the indigenous tribe that lived near the area the deaths happened. The Mansi called the area Dead Mountain, but this theory was never proven and would be very hard to prove anyway given the state of the bodies. Another theory was that the group had stumbled upon a military operation or special forces in the area and had to be eliminated for witnessing something they shouldn't have. Again, this seemed unlikely due to the state of the bodies. Bizarre and rare phenomena such as infrasound waves as well as ball lightning have been theorized as well. UFOs and an alien encounter are one theory that had some popularity due to a couple of factors. One is thanks to some of the photographs recovered from the group's camera equipment, which survived. But even though the hazy photo doesn't give us much, there was buried testimony from witnesses in the area that actually saw orange fiery lights flashing in the sky around the time of the incident. These reports were, again, buried until years later. One investigator in the case actually came forward nearly 40 years later saying, "When E.P. Mazanlov and I examined the scene in May, we found that some young pine trees at the edge of the forest had burn marks, but those burn marks did not have a concentric form or some other pattern. There was no epicenter." This once again confirmed that heated beams of a strong but completely unknown, at least to us, energy were directing their firepower toward specific objects, in this case people, acting selectively. It's also of note that the military at the time were also doing test launches of rockets, another theory of how and what could have been the cause. But one other theory that was taken by Discovery and made into a mock documentary called Russian Yeti, The Killer Lives, was, you guessed it, a Yeti. This commentary was built around a photo taken from Brignoli's camera that shows a figure standing in the snow-covered forest. There's no context for the image or why we would assume this was a Bigfoot or a Yeti, as whatever or whoever it is isn't trying to hide themselves from view very well, but given the circumstances and levels of the unknown in the case, a Yeti attack wouldn't be that far-fetched given the whole of everything that happened. Mentioning the Discovery documentary, there have been other entries into pop culture that featured the story of Dyatlov Pass. One by director Rennie Harlan, called Devil's Pass, takes the route of found footage, following another group of hikers who have decided to recreate the trek taken by Dyatlov and his comrades. The journey ends up as badly for them, this time using a wormhole in science fiction to explain what happened, including mixing in the Philadelphia experiment. The film was a co-production between Russian and British producers, with Harlan doing research in Russia on what happened. His personal theory came down to it being a military experiment gone wrong. In 2015, Kolot, the video game, was released that has the player following in the steps of what happened to the group. The player proceeds to investigate what appears to be an quote-unquote anomaly and other phenomena at the root of what happened. Sean Bean is one of the featured voices who narrates the story. In 2020, Kanal Polska and 123 Productions released one of the biggest entries into the story with Dead Mountain, Dyatlov Pass Incident, which uses flashbacks to the group as well as following a KGB major in 1959 who investigates what happened. It's a fictionalized series but has been given some high marks for the story and skill used in shooting it. The series uses 16mm film for the odd-numbered episodes which follow the investigation. The even-numbered episodes are shot in black and white and follow the hikers and are shot in digital. In 2021, a documentary was released called An Unknown Compelling Force by writer-director Liam Lagoulot, with the filmmaker attempting to finally answer the question of what happened, but still leaving it open to the viewer to decide if they agree. But in 2021, thanks to some help from Elsa and her snow powers, some researchers think they have figured out actually what happened. The theory that was tested using the same technology and code that helped create the animation for Disney's film Frozen was that the tragedy was due to an avalanche, and was what geotechnical engineer Alexander Puzrin was out to prove. The avalanche theory was one that had been used numerous times in the past, but the state of the bodies and the sort of injuries inflicted in conjunction with the environment just didn't mesh. Combining the code and data from General Motors tests from the 70s, it was possible that the avalanche could have caused the crushing injuries. Per National Geographic's write-up on the case, a 16-foot-long block of hefty snow could, in the unique situation of campers sleeping on their skis, for example, break ribs and skulls while having a rigid place to sleep on. Some people find this hard to believe. How could snow do something like what was discovered there? Per Nat Geo and Freddie Wilkinson, a professional mountain climber, it isn't a stretch to believe. Some slabs can be quite hard, and it's very plausible they can result in blunt trauma wounds, he says. I'm absolutely convinced that the tragedy was the result of wind and snow deposition, and the fact that they pitched camp in the lee of a ridge. Wilkinson adds, I've made this mistake in my mountaineering career more than once. During an expedition to Antarctica in 2012, tents belonging to Wilkinson's team were pitched inside a circle of wind-deflecting snow walls they made. Returning to the camp after 3 days, his team found that 2 tents tucked in the wind-shielded wall were completely buried. And while the avalanche theory could answer the question of what happened, it still doesn't explain other parts of the mystery, such as the lights that were seen and the radioactivity on the clothing, or the missing eyes. Dyatlov Pass is one of the most fascinating and tragic mysteries in recent history. The story told by the discovery of the bodies tells us that the friends tried to help each other survive whatever it was they were going through, and that adds an extra level of humanity to the story, one that makes us all want to know the truth of what happened to them so their tale can be complete when told. But I don't know that that will ever be the case. The mountain appears to keep its secrets just as well as the dead do. The mystery of the Dyatlov Pass leaves us searching for answers in a snowstorm of questions that will never stop.